Jets have made plenty of big moves this offseason. Are they now favorites in the AFC East? Let's talk about where the Jets stand in the division today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, May 22nd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Today we have our weekly mailbag show. Each Wednesday we try and do a mailbag episode with listener questions. Thanks so much to everybody who sent in questions. Let's begin. Our first question. Where would you rank the Jets in the division? I feel like it's not unreasonable to think the Jets are the best overall team. On paper, the roster has gotten stronger while the Bills and Dolphins have gotten worse. Personally, I'm more concerned about the Bills than the Dolphins. Curious to hear your thoughts. Yeah. So the first thing I look to do in a situation like this, I just like to look at the odds. What do the odds makers have as the situation in the division? So I took a look at our partner FanDuel, where they have each team ranked in each division. And right now they have the Buffalo Bills as the favorite, plus 160. The Dolphins are the second choice at plus 185, and the Jets are the third choice at plus 210. So according to FanDuel, the Jets are the third most likely team to win the division. But there are a couple of caveats here. First of all, at plus 160, the Bills are the favorite with the lowest odds. So of the 8 divisions, the Bills might be the favorite in the AFC East, but there's less conviction with that prognostication than any other division favorite has. Also, the difference between the Bills right now, again at 160, and the Jets 210, that's a very small difference. In fact, that difference of 50, that's lower than most divisions have between the first and second team. So it's viewed as the odds makers at least are viewing this as a very, very competitive division because you have 3 teams that are in the mix right now. The Bills are the weakest favorite of any of the 8 divisions, and the Jets is the third choice in the AFC East, have better odds than a lot of second choices in each division. Now, where do things stand right now? I think there are a couple of reasons Buffalo is rated number one by the odds makers. I think number one, look, they've won the division 4 straight years, so there's going to be a lot of respect there. Especially while they have lost players, they still do have Josh Allen, who I think by most analyses is still a top 5 quarterback in this league and a difference maker and a guy who can make up for a lot of departures. Number 2, look, the Jets have not played together. On paper is the operative phrase when we talk about the New York Jets, because if everybody stays healthy and everybody plays up to potential, this could be a very, very good team. This is a team that could win the division. The question is whether the older guys they're counting on will, 1, stay healthy, 2, will they will they play up to their performance level? Will they decline? And I think there's also a question of, will the pieces fit together? Because sometimes in the NFL you have a lot of very good individual pieces, but they don't mesh for whatever reason. There are issues in the locker room, and that's not to say that there will be issues with the Jets in the locker room, but you never really know until a team actually plays together. And this Jets team is essentially a collection of a lot of pieces who have accomplished a lot in the NFL, but they haven't done it together. I always think about prognosticating an NFL season. I always like to think, like, how would the season go if you played it out 100 times? And the reason I do that, I understand that you only play the season once, but the reason I think in this way is that, take 2023, for example. If you play that season out 100 times, Aaron Rodgers is not going to tear his Achilles tendon on the 4th play every single time. If what the Jets got in 2023 would probably be at the low end of results when we're talking about, if you played the season out 100 times, you probably would not get many results than the Jets actually got. It's just an unfortunate turn of events. Now, I think there would be a couple of scenarios where the Jets make a deep run in 2023 if you play the season out 100 times. Probably not as many as a lot of people wanted to believe this time a year ago. I mean, I don't think that team was anywhere near as good as a lot of us were hoping it would be this time a year ago. So when you think about playing this season out 100 times, the Jets, I believe, would have a lot of volatility. And I think that's one of the reasons most odds makers have the Jets around 9.5 wins right now. There are going to be teams that are projected to have 9.5 wins, where if you play the season out 100 times, you'll have a lot of 8s in there, you'll have a lot of 9s, you'll have a lot of 10s, you'll have a few 11s sprinkled in. Whereas the Jets could really, really vary based on how certain things go when we're talking about injuries, when we're talking about player performances, we're talking about how the team meshes. If you play the season out 100 times for the Jets, you're probably going to have a fair share of 6-win seasons, some 7-win seasons, some 8-win seasons, some 9-win seasons, some 10-win seasons, but also a bunch of 12-win seasons, because the top end talent is really, really good. And the question is whether the top end talent can perform to that level. And I think that if every team plays its best, if everything goes right for all 4 of these teams, if everything clicks injury wise, and if nobody declines, I actually think the Jets would win the division more often than not. The question is whether the Jets will get that scenario. The Jets certainly hope they get that scenario, but there are no guarantees in this league. And especially when you're leaning on the players the Jets are leaning on, there's a lot that could go right, and there's also a lot that could go wrong. So this team's kind of a mystery in a lot of ways, because the downside is pretty low, but the upside is really, really high. The upside's higher for the Jets this year than it's been probably since 2010, 2011. If everything clicks for this Jets team could contend in the AFC. But of course, that's an enormous if. So I think like when the odds makers build this out, they kind of try and balance the two out. They kind of split the difference. So they say, this Jets team could be a great team. They could be a team that contends in the AFC if everything goes right, or there could be a team picking in the top 10 if everything goes wrong. So you kind of split the difference. You say, all right, 9.5 wins, a third choice in the division, but a very strong third choice. A third choice in the AFC East that would be stronger than a lot of second choices in other divisions. I think that's kind of that's kind of where things fall. It's difficult to say. I do think though that when we're talking top end talent and we're talking about a scenario where everything goes right for your team, Jets will rate really well. The question is whether everything will go right, because the Jets have more question marks than most teams do, and that's ultimately what's going to decide how successful this team is. Next question, John. Flight 24 is out now. I think it's a cool way to show fans what the draft room environment is like. But in terms of actual insights, it's mostly full of cliches and hypes. But similar to what you say about press conferences, sometimes you get interesting insights or little comments or no comments. If you've seen it, were there any interesting insights that you picked up? Well, I'm going to disappoint you. I don't watch Flight 24. It's this YouTube series produced by the Jets. And the reason I don't watch it, I haven't watched it. They have another series, One Jets Drive, and I just remember the Adam Gase years, the One Jets Drive. And it's not like the series the Jets have put out has won awards, so I don't want to be overly critical, but I'm just scarred by the memories of One Jets Drive during the Adam Gase years, where they made it sound like Adam Gase was going to reinvent offense, and like Adam Gase had the league figured out, and Sam Darnold was going to take the league by storm. And after that, it's just difficult for me to watch that show. It's an interesting it's an interesting concept, and I really do enjoy the shows that take you behind the scenes. Like, I'm a fan of Hard Knocks every year. I'm a fan of All or Nothing on Amazon, which is kind of like a version of Hard Knocks that happens during the season, even though I know there's also a Hard Knocks that happens in the season now. But there's a series Amazon has, All or Nothing, and it's not just in the NFL. They have a bunch of seasons in the NFL, but they also go into other sports, and it's released after the season's completed for the team. But I think it's a really interesting insight on what things are like in the locker room. So unfortunately, I have not watched Flight 24 because of my bad memories from the Adam Gase years. But if anybody has any insights that they think they took from them, I'd be interested to hear them. That said, I think whenever the team is producing content, you're getting a very sanitized version of what's happening. So I don't even know that there's a lot of value. Maybe there's not a lot of value in content that the team produces itself. I don't know. I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that. Now, head on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to talk about players who could be looking at an increased role for this team in 2024. There are a couple of names who come to mind, and we'll talk about who they are continuing here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. This episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own, because right now new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. If you're a Knicks fan, you're probably very disappointed. The Eastern Conference Finals got underway in the NBA last night without the Knicks, but you can still win big on FanDuel. And if you're a Rangers fan, well, your Eastern Conference Finals begin tonight as the Rangers take on the Florida Panthers. Very exciting. You hope the Rangers win. And again, you can win on FanDuel, because FanDuel offers you $150 for any winning in bonus bets for any winning $5 bets. And of course, as we just discussed, you could bet on the Jets to win the AFC East if you really believe in this team. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. Again, it's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. A big shout out to our everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday, and then bonus episodes as big news breaks. Let's continue now with our weekly mailbag. Our next question: which returning Jets players do you anticipate will get a higher snap share than they received last season? Well, can I start with the obvious one? I mean, heaven help us if Aaron Rodgers doesn't have a bigger snap share than he did last season. I would take the way over on 4 this year. Knock on wood. So let's hope he doesn't get injured again the first series of the year. But as far as other guys go, who's going to be increasing their roles? I think Jeremy Ruckert will have an increased role. CJ Uzomah is now gone, so Ruckert will now step into that second tight end slot. And Ruckert's got a lot to prove. I mean, the first 2 years, there's a lot of love for Ruckert in the fan base, but there hasn't been a lot of production. He hasn't produced much in the passing game, and he's got a reputation for being a really good blocker, but I think he's been pretty inconsistent in his blocking technique. So he's going to get an opportunity this year. He'll be the second tight end behind Tyler Conklin. The Jets will have some 2 tight end sets that they run now. This is mostly going to be a 3 receiver offense with 1 tight end because you have 4 receivers who are going to rotate in and out. Garrett Wilson and Mike Williams will be on the field nonstop, and then you'll have Malachi Corley and Alan Lazard kind of matching up when the situation dictates. So the 4 receivers the Jets are going to want to get on the field, which will probably limit your opportunity for 2 tight end sets. But with CJ Uzomah gone, I think you certainly can anticipate more snaps for Jeremy Ruckert. On the defensive side of the ball, we just talked about Will McDonald yesterday and how he's going to step into that 3rd defensive end role, which for all intents and purposes, even though you only have 2 starting defensive ends, he's going to get like starter level snaps or close to it. So question for McDonald is, after year 1 where you didn't really play that much, can he step up? Can he take on a bigger role? Can he produce? Because if he becomes a 7 to 8 sack guy, and you pair him with Jermaine Johnson and Hassan Reddick, I mean, this is going to be a very ferocious pass rush off the edge. So, those are the guys that really come to mind. Ashton Davis, yesterday, Robert Saleh spoke to the media, and he indicated that there is an open competition at the safety position, that Ashton Davis is part of it. He's going to battle against Chuck Clark and Tony Adams for the starting job. Tony Adams was a guy I mentioned yesterday as a potential breakout candidate. But he's not guaranteed the starting job right now. And Ashton Davis was kind of Ashton Davis got a lot of praise last year, deservedly so, but he was a role player. He was not a guy that played big snaps in a lot of games. He was a guy who just kind of, played his role really well. He played a lot of almost hybrid safety linebacker. He made a lot of big plays. Now he's going to get an opportunity to earn a bigger role. Will he be up to it? I don't know, but that's another possibility. Our next question: what would you consider a successful season? I really hate to put this kind of pressure on the team, but when you think about everything that's been pushed forward to now, everything that everything the Jets have, all the resources the Jets have borrowed from the future, this team has to go really far. I mean, is it Super Bowl? I think it might be Super Bowl for me. I mean, I don't think you go out and get a future Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers for a 2-year window to make the playoffs. Yeah, look, I understand the Jets haven't made the playoffs in 13 years, but you know what? They haven't won the Super Bowl in 55 years. So this fan base is starved for a champion. I remember when I was a kid, everybody made a big deal because the Rangers went 54 years without winning a Stanley Cup. Jets Super Bowl drought. I mean, that's in that range now. So it's time for the Jets to win big. I think when you think about the future, when you think about, again, all the resources they borrowed to try and make it happen right now. I mean, win now is practically a cliche with this team. All in is practically a cliche with this team. Making the wild card round isn't enough. Making the divisional round isn't enough. I mean, I think, if you want to argue maybe AFC championship game and then Rodgers comes back the next season, I mean, yeah, I can probably buy into that argument, but this team has to go really far, in part because you don't have people running this team who have proven that they know what they're doing. I mean, we need to see some proof Joe Douglas can build a good team. We need to see some proof Robert Saleh can coach a successful team. They've been here a long time. This is, Joe Douglas has been here since 2019, and really 2020 was his first year. So, we can give Douglas 2019 because it was really Mike McCagnon's team, but he's been here 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023. This is year 5 for Joe Douglas, and he hasn't built a winning team yet. So if the Jets win 10 games and make the wild card, does that mean you have faith in Joe Douglas after he's after he's borrowed so many resources to the future, he's maxed this team out. He's maxed out the credit cards to get to go 10-7 in a playoff berth. I don't think that that's good enough. And Robert Saleh has somehow survived 3 straight non-winning seasons, which is very, very rare in this league. So I have a difficult time with the argument that, Saleh doesn't need that either Saleh or Douglas don't need to win big this year, right? For me, making the playoffs is not enough. Again, yeah, fine. They have a long playoff drought. They have a much longer Super Bowl drought. Let's go to the Super Bowl this year. I don't want to hear any excuses. Everything's lined up. We've heard about how Buffalo and Miami have lost a lot of key players, and that's right. And I think that, if the pieces they got play up to their potential, this could be a team that goes a long way. But the question is, will they do it? So I think the expectations should be very high for this team. And I really struggle to come up with a justification for this team not going far. And if they don't go far, I think there should be changes this offseason. Next question. At what point would you start drafting quarterbacks early and often? I would start this year. Look, I think that if you look across the league, a lot of teams have success by thinking proactively at the quarterback position. The team that everybody's criticizing right now is the Atlanta Falcons because they drafted Michael Penix Jr. after paying Kirk Cousins a lot of money. And it's almost like people are acting like spending resources at the most important position on the field is a dumb move. Now, I understand that, there was a good chance. There's a discussion to be had that, they had to have known Penix was probably going to be there at 8. And did they really need to spend $100 million on Kirk Cousins if they knew Penix was going to be there and they liked Penix? But at the end of the day, it amazes me how teams are criticized for overspending for pouring too many resources into the quarterback position. Look what the Jets did last year. Jets gave you nothing at the backup quarterback spot. I wish the Jets had poured a lot of resources into the quarterback position last year because maybe the season would have gone a little bit better. Look, and again, I get it, but if you look historically, like what people are saying about Penix and Cousins in Atlanta now, these were the exact same comments made in 2020 when the Packers drafted Jordan Love. Literally the exact same comments were made. The Packers drafted Jordan Love instead of focusing at another position. The same comments were made in 2020 when the Eagles drafted Jalen Hurts when they still had Carson Wentz. When you find the right quarterback, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter that he's not going to help you in the here and now. Finding a long-term solution to quarterback is the most important thing a team can do. And you can't always do it at the time that's most convenient to you. Sometimes you have to do it a year or two early. Nobody's saying these things about Jalen Hurts now. Nobody's saying these things about the Jordan Love draft pick now. Everybody's so caught in the moment about how much will a guy you draft help you this year? When you're drafting for the long run, you're drafting for the next 10 to 15 years at the quarterback position. And yeah, if a guy has to sit for a year or two, it's fine because at the end of the day, all anybody cares about, you go back to 2012, people criticized the Seahawks for drafting Russell Wilson because they had just signed Matt Flynn. Exact same argument. And nobody ever thinks do these arguments hold up over the long run? They don't. They never. All that matters is, did the guy you draft end up being good? So I would have liked to have seen the Jets be more aggressive drafting quarterbacks early the last 2 years, but it wasn't meant to be. And I do believe that, you should keep drafting quarterbacks till you hit on a guy. Jordan Travis, we'll see what happens with him. He's an interesting developmental prospect, but I think that the Jets would be well advised to think of the future of the quarterback position. Of course, this year it's a little late because the draft's over, but going forward, I think the Jets should definitely be the Jets should definitely be thinking past Aaron Rodgers. Now, during the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll turn our attention to Quincy Williams. Had a breakout season last year. Could he get even better this year? Well, it's going to be tough, and we'll talk about why as we continue here on this Wednesday mailbag edition of Locked On Jets. Our episode today of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Gametime. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Gametime takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. If you're a Rangers fan, Game 1 tonight. Gametime's the place to go. Gametime has amazing deals on its seats. I've used Gametime myself on a number of occasions. Just pull out your phone or mobile device, open up the app, and you can find amazing deals again on last-minute seats. And it's a great place to find NFL tickets. If you want to go see the Jets this year, maybe you want to travel out to San Francisco for Week 1, catch them on Monday Night Football against the 49ers. Maybe you want to go to one of their many home games this year. Maybe you want to head out to London, see them take on the Minnesota Vikings. Gametime is the place to go. You get the view from your seat before you buy, so there are no surprises when you get to the stadium. And again, the deals are just so outstanding. It's tough to believe some of the prices you get on Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Wednesday. We're doing our weekly mailbag show. Let's continue now with our next question. Has Quincy Williams hit his ceiling, or do you think he could be even better this season? Well, it's always possible a player can get better, but I would have to presume that Quincy's hit his ceiling. First of all, he's not that young. I mean, he's in his prime right now, and his trajectory has been pretty amazing. I mean, he started out as a guy who was waived by the Jacksonville Jaguars at a point where the Jaguars were one of the worst teams in the NFL, and the Jets brought him aboard to be a depth player. And, early on in his Jets career, he wasn't that good. I mean, he had a couple of big games a few years back, but he wasn't that impressive. And then he kind of grew into a guy who was an okay starter. He wasn't spectacular, but, playing him at linebacker wasn't going to kill you. And then last year he improved and became a first-team All-Pro. I don't know that there's much room left for him to improve, first of all, because, again, he's not that young. I mean, he's probably at the age where he's at his prime. He's near the point where, guy may start to decline a little bit. But the second issue is, I mean, how much better can he get? He was first-team All-Pro last year. When you're first-team All-Pro, that means you're the best at your position. So, I mean, short of him becoming like Ray Lewis or something like that, I don't know how much better he can get. He was outstanding. I mean, he was one of the stories of the Jets season in 2023. And there was not a lot of good that was happening around that team last year. But the emergence of Quincy Williams, and Quincy Williams probably got to be a little frustrated, and Quincy Williams' agents probably got to be a little frustrated, because that's the year you want to have when your contract expires. It's not the year you want to have after you sign an affordable contract. That the deal the Jets got Quincy Williams on is now one of the most affordable. It's one of the best value contracts in the NFL at the linebacker position or anywhere, because the Jets got a guy who turned into a first-team All-Pro at a pretty reasonable price. I think even if Quincy had stayed at his previous level, I think if he had just been a guy who was okay but not great, the Jets contract for him would have been fine. But now it's an incredible value since Quincy has developed into a star level player. And the other thing I think made a difference for as far as Quincy's breakout goes is, I think it made CJ Mosley better, because suddenly Mosley doesn't have to cover all this ground. Suddenly Mosley can just kind of play straight ahead. He can be the guy that makes sure everybody's lined up correctly, and he can kind of just focus on stopping the run. So I think that he and Mosley complement each other really well. And I think Mosley's first couple of years with the Jets, he wasn't terrible, but he wasn't great. And now Quincy can kind of take the tougher assignments, and Mosley can just focus on the things he does well. So I think that they're a good pairing together. But can Quincy get better? I mean, what's Quincy got to improve on? He's so much fun to watch run around the field. I mean, I love players like Quincy Williams who are fast, who have a ton of range, who even if they're nowhere near the ball carrier, they're going to figure out a way to get to him and make a play. But how much better can Quincy get? I guess that's the question. I think part of this is a commentary on how well he played last year, because he was just out of this world good. And I remember the first game against Buffalo, he had a great game. And I was a little skeptical, because I've seen this before. Quincy, his first couple of years with the Jets, was a guy who, when he was good, he was really good. But when he was bad, he was really bad. So we saw the really good week one. But then week after week after week, he kept stacking the good games on. You hear all the time with players who are inconsistent, if they could just find consistency, they'd be a great player. Well, that's the biggest aspect of being a great player, is doing it consistently. Lots of guys in the NFL can do it like occasionally. There are a lot like, pretty much if you're in the NFL, you probably have the talent to be a great player occasionally, because if you were in the NFL, that means you were one of the best players on the field every time you stepped foot on the field in college football. The only guys who make the NFL, even as practice squatters, are guys who were stars in college. So it's easy to say, oh, if the guy could only play with consistency, he'd be really good. Everybody, if they play with consistency, is going to be really good. Quincy struggled with his consistency the first couple of years, and then last year things just clicked. It felt like it was in an instant, and suddenly he was a different player, and Jets certainly benefited from that. For me, the question is more, can Quincy maintain that level of play? Again, it's one thing to do it once. It's one thing to do it in a game. It's another to do it for the course of a full season. The question is, can you stack good seasons together? Not everybody can. Sometimes you just have a career year that's out of context with the rest of your career. So I think that's the hope for Quincy. It's not so much that he gets better, that he sustains that level of play, because he was an outstanding linebacker last season. You hope that he maintains that level. You hope he doesn't drop to the guy he was, in 2021 or 2022. Although I will say that, even if he does, I don't think his contract is that bad. I think the Jets signed him to a good contract. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out and helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Wednesday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.